The planet Zorathia was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Its sky shimmered with hues of violet and gold, while towering crystalline spires dominated the horizon like ancient sentinels, guarding secrets older than time itself. The air was thick with an otherworldly energy that made every breath feel charged, almost electric. It was here, on this alien world, that representatives of Earth stood face to face with the Luminari Syndicate, a council of beings who ruled over dozens of star systems with cold intellect and unshakable pride. Jae-ho adjusted his uniform collar as he stepped forward, flanked by Su-min and Dong-woo. He could feel the weight of countless eyes upon him, some curious, others dismissive, but he kept his expression calm and composed. This meeting wasn't just about diplomacy, it was about survival. Humanity's resources were dwindling, its population straining under the pressures of climate change and resource depletion. Reaching out to the galaxy for help wasn't a choice. It was a necessity. On the other side of the Grand Chamber, the Luminari Council sat in their elevated seats, their forms glowing faintly with bioluminescent patterns that shifted with their moods. Their leader, Veilon, leaned forward slightly, his elongated head tilting as if studying insects beneath a microscope. His voice echoed through the room when he finally spoke, rich with condescension. "So," Veilon began, his tone dripping with disdain, "you are the humans we've heard so much about, creatures of flesh and frailty, clinging to life on a dying rock." Jae-ho clenched his jaw but forced himself to remain polite. "We come in peace, seeking mutual understanding and cooperation. Our planet faces challenges, yes, but we believe collaboration can benefit both our peoples." Veilon let out a low hum, the sound reverberating through the chamber like distant thunder. Beside Jae-ho, Su-min shifted uncomfortably. She was used to being underestimated because of her quiet demeanor, but even she couldn't ignore the blatant arrogance radiating from the council members. Dong-woo, standing tall and stoic at Jae-ho's right, crossed his arms tightly across his chest, his sharp gaze scanning the room for any signs of hostility. One of the council members, a slender figure named Kalith, raised a hand lazily. "Tell us, human diplomat, what do you bring to the table? What value could your primitive species possibly offer us?" Su-min took a small step forward before Jae-ho could respond. Her voice was soft yet steady, carrying an authority that surprised even herself. "Our advancements may not match yours in some areas, but we excel in adaptability and innovation. For example, our recent breakthroughs in sustainable energy solutions have allowed us to stabilize ecosystems on the brink of collapse." Kalith's lips curled into something resembling a smirk. "Adaptability, you say? How quaint. We mastered such trivialities millennia ago." Dong-woo's patience was wearing thin. He didn't trust these aliens, not after years spent preparing for potential extraterrestrial threats, and their mocking attitude only fueled his suspicion. Still, he remained silent, letting Jae-ho handle the conversation. Jae-ho nodded slowly, choosing his words carefully. "Perhaps our methods differ, but isn't diversity the foundation of progress? By working together, we might discover new possibilities neither of us could achieve alone." Veilon leaned back in his seat, his glowing markings dimming slightly as if bored. "You speak boldly for someone representing such an insignificant species. Very well, humans. Prove your worth. Show us why we should waste our time on you." The challenge hung heavy in the air, and Jae-ho felt the pressure settle onto his shoulders. He glanced briefly at Su-min and Dong-woo, silently asking for their support. They gave him slight nods, their expressions resolute despite the odds stacked against them. "We accept," Jae-ho said firmly, his voice unwavering. "Give us a task, and we will show you the strength of humanity." Veilon exchanged glances with the other council members, a flicker of amusement passing between them. Finally, he gestured toward a holographic display hovering above the center of the chamber. Images of sprawling cities, overtaken by strange crystalline growths, appeared, accompanied by data streams detailing environmental devastation. "This is the scoria plague," Veilon explained, "an invasive fungal organism consuming our planet's energy reserves." Solve this problem within 3 rotations of Zorathia's sun, and perhaps we will reconsider your proposal. Jeho swallowed hard, knowing full well how impossible the task seemed. But there was no turning back now. Understood, he replied. We'll need access to all available research and materials related to the plague. Granted, Veilon said dismissively. Fail, however, and you will leave our presence forever. As the meeting concluded, the humans exited the chamber, their footsteps echoing softly against the polished floor. Once outside, Dongwu exhaled sharply, breaking the tense silence. They're testing us, Jeho. Don't forget that. I know, Jeho muttered, rubbing his temples. But we don't have a choice. If we fail, Earth loses its chance at survival. Sumin placed a reassuring hand on Jeho's shoulder. Let's focus on what we can control. I'll start analyzing the data they provided. There has to be a pattern or weakness we can exploit. Dongwu nodded grimly. And I'll keep an eye on these so-called allies. Something tells me they won't make this easy for us. Back inside the chamber, the luminary watched the humans depart through translucent walls. Kaleth chuckled softly. Do you think they'll actually succeed? Veilon's markings pulsed faintly, a sign of mild irritation. No, but watching them struggle will be entertaining. Little did the council realize, the humans weren't just fighting for recognition. They were fighting for their future, and humanity had always been at its best when backed into a corner. The Scoria plague was unlike anything Sumin had ever encountered. Its crystalline structures spread like veins across the landscape, pulsating faintly with an eerie blue light. The fungus consumed energy from electromagnetic fields, feeding on the very lifeblood of Zorathia's advanced technology. Entire cities were being swallowed whole, their towering spires reduced to rubble as the plague expanded unchecked. For the Luminari, it was a disaster they couldn't contain. For humanity, it was a test that would define their worth. Jeho, Sumin, and Dongwu gathered in a makeshift lab provided by the council. The room was sterile and cold, filled with alien equipment that hummed softly under dim lighting. Sumin stood at the center of the chaos, her hands moving deftly over samples brought from the infected zones. Her eyes darted between screens displaying complex data streams, her mind racing to piece together the puzzle before them. Dongwu leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching her work with quiet intensity. How bad is it? He asked finally, breaking the silence. Sumin didn't look up as she adjusted a scanner. Bad, she replied simply. This thing feeds on electromagnetic energy, which means it's targeting everything. Power grids, communication systems, even basic machinery. If we don't stop it, Zorathia will collapse. Jeho frowned, pacing slowly behind her. Can you find a way to neutralize it? I'm working on it, Sumin said, her voice calm but firm. She pulled up a holographic model of the fungal structure, rotating it to examine its intricate lattice. It's smart, almost too smart. It adapts to whatever countermeasures are used against it. That's why the Luminari haven't been able to stop it. Dongwu straightened, his sharp gaze narrowing. They're not exactly trying hard, though. Did you see how disorganized their response teams are? They're throwing resources at the problem without any real strategy. Sumin nodded absently, her focus still on the hologram. Their arrogance is part of the issue. They think brute force will solve everything. But this isn't something you can just destroy. It needs to be understood. As the hours passed, Sumin began to notice patterns in the fungus's growth. It thrived in areas with high electromagnetic activity, but slowed significantly in regions where such energy was scarce. This gave her an idea. If they could disrupt the flow of energy feeding the fungus, they might be able to starve it into dormancy. She turned to Jeho and Dongwu, her expression brightening slightly. I think I have a plan. We need to create a containment field and artificial barrier that blocks electromagnetic waves. Without access to energy, the fungus won't be able to grow. Jeho raised an eyebrow. Doable? It's risky, but yes, Sumin said. We'll need materials from the Luminari's reserves, but if we calibrate the field correctly, it should work, Dongwu grunted. Assuming they give us what we need. They'll have to, Jeho said firmly. If they want results, They'll cooperate or risk losing their planet. The next morning, the humans presented their findings to the Luminary Council. Velan listened impassively as Su Min explained her plan, his glowing markings flickering faintly with impatience. When she finished, Calith scoffed openly. "That's your solution?" he sneered. "A simple containment field? How primitive!" Su Min clenched her fists, but kept her tone professional. "Primitive or not, it's based on logic and evidence. Your current methods aren't working because they rely on brute force. This approach targets the root cause of the problem." Velan exchanged glances with the other council members, their expressions unreadable. Finally, he waved a dismissive hand. "Very well. Proceed with your experiment, but do not expect assistance from us." Jeho stepped forward, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "We'll handle it. Just provide the materials we requested." "Granted," Velan said curtly. "But remember, failure will not be tolerated." Back in the lab, the humans got to work immediately. Su Min designed the containment field using alien tech, while Dong Wu oversaw construction efforts. Jeho coordinated with local workers, ensuring everyone followed instructions precisely. Despite the Luminaries' lack of support, the team worked tirelessly, driven by determination and the knowledge that failure wasn't an option. Days turned into nights as the project progressed. Su Min barely slept, her mind consumed by calculations and simulations. Dong Wu pushed himself to the limit, supervising every detail of the field's assembly. Even Jeho pitched in whenever he could, lending his diplomatic skills to smooth over tensions with reluctant workers. Meanwhile, cracks began to form within the Luminary Council. Yunji, the youngest member, watched the humans with growing admiration. She admired their resilience and ingenuity, qualities she felt her own people sorely lacked. During one council meeting, she voiced her concerns. "We underestimated them," she said quietly, drawing surprised looks from her peers. "Their approach is unconventional, but it has merit. Perhaps we should consider assisting them instead of standing idly by." Calith snorted derisively. "Assist them? Why bother? Let them fail on their own terms." Yunji's expression hardened. "And if they succeed, what then? Will we admit our mistakes or continue down this path of arrogance?" Velan silenced the argument with a sharp gesture. "Enough. We will observe and wait. If their plan works, we will take credit. If it fails, we will cast them aside." Outside the council chambers, the humans remained oblivious to the internal struggles of their hosts. Their focus was singular, completing the containment field before time ran out. As the final components came together, Su Min ran one last simulation, her heart pounding with anticipation. "It's ready," she announced, turning to Jeho and Dong Woon. "All we need now is to deploy it." Jeho nodded, his expression grim. "Let's hope this works." The deployment process was fraught with challenges. The containment field had to be placed strategically around key infection points, requiring precise coordination. Dongwu led ground teams, ensuring each unit followed protocol to the letter. Su Min monitored readings remotely, making adjustments as needed. Jeho served as the linchpin, keeping lines of communication open and morale high. Despite their best efforts, obstacles arose constantly. Equipment malfunctioned, weather conditions worsened, and skepticism from local workers threatened to derail progress. Yet through it all, the humans persevered. Their unity became a beacon of hope amidst the chaos, inspiring those around them to push harder. Finally, after days of relentless effort, the containment field was activated. A shimmering dome of energy enveloped the targeted area, cutting off the fungus's access to electromagnetic waves. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then, slowly but surely, the crystalline growths began to recede. The plague faltered, its once unstoppable advance grinding to a halt. Cheers erupted among the human-led teams, their exhaustion giving way to jubilation. Su Min slumped into a chair, tears of relief streaming down her face. Dongwu allowed himself a rare smile, clapping Jeho on the shoulder. For the first time since arriving on Zerathia, they felt a glimmer of victory. Unbeknownst to them, however, the Luminary Council watched from afar, their glowing markings dimming with unease. What had started as a test of humanity's worth had become something far more significant, a lesson in humility and cooperation. And for beings accustomed to dominance, that realization was both unsettling and inevitable. The containment field was working. The crystalline fungus that had once spread uncontrollably across Zorathia's surface was now retreating, its growth stunted by the absence of electromagnetic energy. For the first time in months, the Luminari Council allowed themselves a moment of cautious optimism, but their relief was short-lived. Beneath their polished exteriors, pride and envy simmered like an unquenched fire. In the days following the activation of the containment field, the humans continued to monitor its effects. Su-min spent hours analyzing data streams, her sharp eyes scanning for any signs of instability. Dongwu oversaw maintenance teams, ensuring the field remained intact despite harsh environmental conditions. Jae-ho acted as the bridge between the humans and the Luminari, attending meetings and addressing concerns with calm professionalism. But behind closed doors, the council plotted against them. Veilun sat at the head of the chamber, his glowing markings pulsing faintly with irritation. "They've done what we could not," he muttered, his voice low but laced with venom. "And now they stand as heroes in the eyes of our people." Caliph leaned forward, his elongated fingers tapping rhythmically against the armrest of his seat. "It's unacceptable. If this continues, they'll gain influence over Zorathia. Over us." Yunji, who had grown increasingly uneasy with the council's behavior, spoke up hesitantly. "Perhaps we should acknowledge their success. They've proven themselves capable allies." "Acknowledge them?" Caliph snapped, his tone dripping with disdain. "No. We must remind them and everyone else who holds power here." Veilun nodded slowly, a plan forming in his mind. "We sabotage their efforts, make it appear as though their solution is flawed. When it fails, we step in and restore order. Our authority will remain unquestioned." Yunji's heart sank. She wanted to protest, to argue that such actions would only deepen the divide between their species. But she knew better than to challenge Veilun directly. Instead, she remained silent, her glowing markings dimming slightly in resignation. That night, under the cover of darkness, a group of luminary engineers infiltrated the containment field's control hub. Using advanced tools, they tampered with the system, subtly altering its calibration. The changes were minor enough to avoid immediate detection, but significant enough to destabilize the field over time. By morning, cracks began to show, literally. Small fractures appeared along the edges of the containment dome, allowing faint traces of electromagnetic energy to seep through. The fungus, sensing the renewed source of sustenance, began to regrow. At first, the changes were subtle, almost imperceptible. But within hours, the plague surged back with alarming speed, consuming everything in its path. Su-min was the first to notice. Her monitors lit up with warning alerts, showing spikes in fungal activity. She rushed to the control hub, her heart pounding as she scanned the readings. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. "Someone tampered with the system," she said grimly, turning to Jae-ho and Dongwu, who had joined her moments later. "The calibration has been altered. This wasn't an accident." Dongwu's jaw tightened. "Sabotage!" Jae-ho clenched his fists, his frustration boiling over. "Who would do this? Why?" "The council," Dongwu growled, his voice cold with certainty. "They can't stand seeing us succeed." Before they could act, word of the field's failure reached the Luminari Council. Veilun wasted no time seizing the opportunity. He called an emergency meeting, summoning the humans to the chamber. When Jae-ho, Su-min, and Dongwu arrived, they were met with accusatory stares. "You promised us a solution," Veilun said, his tone icy. "Instead, you've made the problem worse." Jae-ho took a step forward, his expression fierce. "That's not true. Someone sabotaged the containment field. We didn't cause this." "Convenient excuse," Caliph sneered. "Your incompetence is clear for all to see." Su-min stepped beside Jae-ho, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "We have evidence of tampering. If you allow us to investigate—" "Enough!" Veilun interrupted, slamming his hand on the table. "Your failures have cost us dearly. Leave our planet immediately." The humans stared at him in disbelief. After everything they'd done, the sacrifices they'd made, They were being cast aside without so much as an investigation. Yunji looked away, guilt etched into her glowing features. She wanted to speak out, to defend them, but fear held her tongue. Jae-ho turned to his team, his voice low but resolute. "Let's go." As they exited the chamber, Dongwoo glanced back at the council, his eyes burning with anger. "This isn't over," he muttered under his breath. Back at their lab, the humans packed their equipment in silence. The weight of betrayal hung heavy in the air, each of them processing the events in their own way. Su-min worked methodically, her movements precise but mechanical. Dongwoo paced the room, his fists clenched tightly. Jae-ho stood near the window, staring out at the alien landscape, his thoughts racing. "We can't leave like this," Jae-ho said finally, breaking the silence. "Not without giving them one last chance." Su-min looked up from her work. "What do you mean?" "I mean we leave instructions," Jae-ho explained. "Detailed steps for fixing the containment field. If they follow them, they might still save their planet. If not..." He trailed off, his voice heavy with implication. Dongwoo crossed his arms, his expression skeptical. "You think they'll listen?" "No," Jae-ho admitted. "But it's worth a try. Maybe someone among them will see reason." With that, Su-min began compiling the information. She wrote clearly and concisely, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Alongside the technical details, she included a stern warning. "Fix your mistakes or face extinction." It was a message meant to cut through arrogance and force the council to confront reality. When the preparations were complete, the humans boarded their ship. As they ascended into the skies of Zorathia, they looked down at the planet one last time. The crystalline fungus continued to spread unchecked, swallowing entire cities whole. The sight was devastating, but it wasn't humanity's burden to bear anymore. Inside the council chamber, Velan watched the human vessel disappear into the horizon. His glowing markings flickered faintly, betraying a hint of unease. Around him, the other council members shifted uncomfortably, their confidence shaken. "They're gone," Caliph said, breaking the silence. "Now what?" Velan didn't answer immediately. His gaze lingered on the empty sky where the ship had vanished. For the first time in centuries, doubt crept into his mind. Had they made a grave mistake? Yunji stepped forward, her voice trembling but determined. "We need to act now, before it's too late." Velan turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Act? How? Their solution failed." "Because we sabotaged it," Yunji shot back, her courage surprising even herself. "If we want to survive, we need to fix it ourselves, or reach out to them again." The chamber fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. Slowly, Velan's markings dimmed, a sign of reluctant acceptance. Perhaps, just perhaps, humanity's departure wasn't the end, but the beginning of something far more humbling. The humans' ship soared through the vast expanse of space, leaving Zorathia far behind. Inside the vessel, silence reigned. Jae-ho sat in the cockpit, his hands resting lightly on the controls as he stared out at the endless sea of stars. Su-min was seated nearby, her eyes fixed on a holographic display showing the final instructions they had left for the Luminari. Dongwoo leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his expression unreadable but his thoughts turbulent. None of them spoke. The weight of what had happened hung heavy in the air, a mix of anger, frustration, and sadness. They had come to Zorathia hoping to forge an alliance, to prove humanity's worth and secure a future for their species. Instead, they were dismissed, betrayed, and sent away like unwanted guests. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but there was nothing more they could do, not now anyway. Hours passed as the ship traveled further from Zorathia. Eventually, Su-min broke the silence. "Do you think they'll follow our instructions?" she asked softly, her voice tinged with doubt. Jae-ho sighed deeply before answering. "Honestly, I don't know. The council is too proud. Even if someone among them sees reason, it'll take a miracle for them to admit they were wrong." Dongwoo grunted, pushing himself off the wall. "They're arrogant fools. If they don't fix things soon, their planet will be gone. Good riddance." Su-min frowned, shaking her head slightly. It's not that simple. Millions of innocent people live there. We can't just write them off because their leaders made mistakes. Jeho nodded slowly. You're right, but it's out of our hands now. All we can do is hope they listen. 4. The next few days, the crew focused on navigating back to Earth. They monitored the ship's systems, ensured supplies were intact, and tried to keep their minds occupied. Yet, the memory of Zorathia lingered like a shadow, haunting their thoughts. Each of them wrestled with different emotions: anger, regret, guilt, but none voiced their feelings aloud. Sometimes, silence was easier than confronting the truth. Meanwhile, on Zorathia, chaos reigned supreme. The crystalline fungus spread unchecked, its tendrils consuming entire cities within hours. Towering spires crumbled under the weight of the plague, sending shockwaves through the ground. The once proud civilization of the Luminari teetered on the brink of collapse. In the council chamber, panic set in. Vaylon paced back and forth, his glowing markings flickering erratically as he struggled to maintain composure. Kalith slumped in his seat, his usual smug demeanor replaced by fear. Yunji stood apart from the others, her gaze fixed on the holographic displays showing the devastation unfolding across the planet. We need to act, Yunji said finally, her voice firm despite the tension in the room. If we don't stabilize the containment field, Zorathia won't last another week. Vaylon stopped pacing, turning to glare at her. Act? How? Their solution failed. It didn't fail, Yunji shot back, her courage surprising even herself. We sabotaged it. You know it and I know it. Denying the truth won't save us. Kalith scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. Even if that's true, it doesn't matter now. The humans are gone. What can we possibly do? Yunji stepped forward, her glowing markings brightening with resolve. We used their instructions. They left detailed steps for fixing the containment field. If we follow them carefully, we might still have a chance. Vaylon hesitated, his pride warring with desperation. Finally, he let out a frustrated growl. Fine, gather a team and attempt repairs, but if this fails... He trailed off, the threat hanging unspoken in the air. Yunji didn't wait for further permission. She gathered a group of engineers and scientists, many of whom shared her growing disillusionment with the council's leadership. Together, they studied the humans' notes, piecing together the steps needed to restore the containment field. At first, progress was slow. The humans' instructions were clear, but implementing them required precision and cooperation, qualities the Luminari sorely lacked. Arguments erupted frequently among the team members, their egos clashing as they struggled to work together. Equipment malfunctioned, environmental conditions worsened, and time continued to slip away. Despite these challenges, Yunji refused to give up. She pushed herself and her team to the limit, working tirelessly day and night. Her determination inspired those around her, gradually breaking down barriers of distrust and arrogance. Slowly but surely, the pieces began to fall into place. Back on the human ship, life settled into a quiet rhythm. The journey home was long, and there was little to do but wait. Still, the events on Zorathia weighed heavily on everyone's minds. One evening, as the ship drifted silently through space, Jeho called a meeting in the main cabin. I've been thinking, he began, his tone serious, about what we did, or didn't do, on Zorathia. Sumin looked up from her datapad, curiosity sparking in her eyes. What do you mean? We walked away, Jeho continued. We gave them instructions and left, but was that enough? Should we have stayed longer? Tried harder to make them understand? Dongwu shrugged, his expression guarded. They made their choice. We couldn't force them to listen. Maybe not, Jeho admitted. But I can't shake the feeling that we abandoned them. Not just the council, but the people who live there. Innocent lives are at stake. Sumin nodded thoughtfully. I feel the same way. Leaving wasn't easy, but staying wouldn't have changed anything. They weren't ready to accept help. Jeho leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. Maybe you're right, but I wonder, will they ever learn? Will they realize how dangerous their arrogance is? No one had an answer. The question lingered in the air, unanswered and unresolved. On Zorathia, the situation grew increasingly dire. Despite Yunji's best efforts, the repairs faltered. The containment field remained unstable, its fractures widening with each passing hour. The fungus surged forward, relentless and unstoppable. Entire regions fell into darkness as power grids collapsed, plunging cities into chaos. Desperation gripped the Luminary Council. Valon convened an emergency session, his glowing markings dimming with exhaustion. "This isn't working," he admitted reluctantly. "We need another plan." Yunji seized the opportunity. "There's only one option left," she said, firmly. "We contact the humans, ask for their help again." Kalith laughed bitterly. "And grovel at their feet? Never!" "It's not about pride anymore," Yunji snapped. "It's about survival. If we don't swallow our arrogance, we'll lose everything." Valon stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Send a message. Beg if you must. Just bring them back." Yunji didn't waste a second. She activated an old communication relay left behind by the humans, composing a message filled with humility and urgency. "To the representatives of Earth," she wrote, her hands trembling slightly. "We were wrong to betray your trust. Please forgive us and return to Zorathia. Without your guidance, we face extinction." The message was transmitted into the EAO void of space, a desperate plea carried by invisible waves. Whether the humans would receive it, and whether they would respond, remained uncertain. But for the first time in centuries, the Luminary Council acknowledged their own flaws, taking a step toward redemption. As the ship carrying Jie-Ho, Su-Min, and Dong-Wu sailed ever closer to Earth, the seeds of change were planted on Zorathia. Pride had led to ruin, but perhaps humility could pave the way to salvation. The galaxy held countless lessons, and humanity's silent departure had taught the Luminary the most valuable one of all. No species is truly alone. The message from Zorathia traveled through the vast emptiness of space, a faint signal carried by ancient waves. It reached Earth days later, intercepted by one of humanity's deep space communication arrays. When Jie-Ho received the transmission, he was seated in his office at the United Earth Council headquarters, reviewing reports on resource shortages and climate recovery efforts. The screen lit up suddenly, displaying Yunji's plea. Jie-Ho read the words carefully, his expression unreadable. The message was filled with humility, something the Luminary had never shown before. They admitted their mistakes, begged for forgiveness, and pleaded for humanity's return to Zorathia. Jie-Ho leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen, as if it might offer answers to questions he hadn't yet asked. Su-Min found him there hours later, still sitting motionless. She placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "Is something wrong?" she asked softly. "They sent a message," Jie-Ho replied without looking up. "From Zorathia." Su-Min's eyes widened slightly. "What did they say?" Jie-Ho turned the screen toward her, letting her read the message herself. Her lips parted in surprise as she absorbed the words. "They're asking for help," she murmured. "After everything they did?" Dong-Wu entered the room moments later, drawn by the tension in the air. "What's going on?" he demanded, his sharp gaze moving between Jie-Ho and Su-Min. "They want us to come back," Jie-Ho explained, his voice neutral. "To save them," Dong-Wu snorted derisively. "And why should we? They betrayed us once. What's stopping them from doing it again? That's what I'm trying to decide," Jie-Ho said, standing up and pacing slowly. "If we go back, we risk wasting resources we can't afford to lose. But if we don't, millions of innocent lives could be lost." Su-Min frowned, her mind racing. "It's not just about them," she said finally. "If Zorathia falls, the fallout could destabilize nearby star systems. This isn't just their problem, it's ours too." Dong-Wu crossed his arms tightly, his skepticism evident. "Even if that's true, how do we know they won't stab us in the back again? Trust isn't something you give lightly." "I agree," Jie-Ho said firmly. "But trust isn't the only factor here. Humanity has always thrived because of our adaptability and resilience. If we turn away now, we're no better than the Luminari when they dismissed us." The three of them fell silent, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Su-Min spoke up. "We need to send someone back, but with conditions. Total transparency and cooperation. No more secrets, no more sabotage. Jeho nodded slowly. Agreed. And I think you should lead the team, Sumin. You understand the technology better than anyone. Sumin hesitated, surprised by the suggestion. Are you sure? What about you? I'll stay here, Jeho said, his tone resolute. Someone needs to coordinate efforts on Earth while you handle things on Zorathia. Dongwu will go with you. He'll ensure the Luminari keep their word. Dongwu grunted but didn't argue. Fine, but if they try anything, I won't hesitate to act. With the decision made, preparations began immediately. A small task force was assembled, equipped with advanced tools and supplies needed to stabilize the containment field. Sumin worked tirelessly, refining their approach based on lessons learned during their previous attempt. Dongwu oversaw security measures, ensuring the team would be prepared for any treachery. Days later, the ship carrying Sumin, Dongwu, and their crew launched into the stars once more. As they approached Zorathia, the planet looked even worse than before. The crystalline fungus had spread across nearly half the surface, its blue glow casting eerie shadows over the ruined landscape. Entire cities were buried beneath layers of crystal, their once proud spires reduced to jagged ruins. When they landed, Eunji was waiting for them, her glowing markings dim with exhaustion. She bowed deeply, a gesture of respect rarely seen among the Luminari. Thank you for returning, she said simply. We know we don't deserve your help, but we are grateful. Sumin nodded curtly. We're here to stop the plague, not for your sake, but for everyone's. Understand this. If you betray us again, we won't come back. Yunji met her gaze steadily. You have my word. We've learned from our mistakes. As the humans set to work, the atmosphere was tense, but cooperative. Yunji accompanied them everywhere, acting as both guide and mediator. Under her leadership, the Luminari engineers followed instructions meticulously, their earlier arrogance replaced by determination. Even Wei Lan seemed subdued, his usual condescension absent as he observed the humans' efforts. Progress was slow but steady. Sumin recalibrated the containment field, reinforcing its structure to prevent further breaches. Dongwu supervised teams of workers, ensuring every detail was executed flawlessly. Despite the challenges, the humans and Luminari began to form, a fragile bond, united by a common goal. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold, Sumin stood near the edge of the containment field. The hum of energy surrounded her, a constant reminder of the delicate balance they were trying to maintain. Yunji joined her moments later, her glowing markings flickering softly in the fading light. You've done remarkable work, Yunji said quietly. I wish we had listened to you sooner. Sumin glanced at her, her expression thoughtful. It's not too late to learn. Arrogance blinds people to possibilities, to solutions, even to survival. Humility opens doors. Pride keeps locked. Yunji nodded, her markings brightening slightly. You're right, and I promise you, we'll remember this lesson. Back at the command center, Dongwu monitored progress reports, his sharp eyes scanning for any signs of trouble. For the first time since arriving, he allowed himself to relax slightly. The Luminari weren't perfect. They still argued and struggled with teamwork, but they were trying. That counted for something. By the end of the week, the containment field was fully operational once more. The crystalline fungus began to recede, its growth stunted by the absence of electromagnetic energy. Cities trapped beneath layers of crystal slowly emerged, their structures damaged but salvageable. Hope returned to Zorathia, sparking a renewed sense of unity among its people. Wei Lan called a meeting to formally acknowledge the humans' role in saving the planet. Standing before the council, he addressed Sumin and Dongwu directly. Your actions have spared us from destruction, he said, his voice heavy with regret. For that, we owe you a debt we cannot repay. Dongwu stepped forward, his expression stern. Words mean nothing unless they're backed by action. Prove to us and to yourselves that you've changed, Wei Lan nodded solemnly. We will. From this day forward, the Luminary Syndicate will seek cooperation over dominance. You have our word. As the meeting concluded, Su-min turned to Yunji. Will you hold them to that promise? I will, Yunji replied, her glowing markings steady and bright. Change won't happen overnight, but it starts now. The humans prepared to leave Zorathia once more, their mission complete. As their ship ascended into the skies, they looked down at the planet below. The crystalline fungus was gone, replaced by the faint glow of recovery. It was a bittersweet victory, one born of struggle, betrayal, and redemption. Inside the ship, Su-min sat quietly, her thoughts drifting to the lessons learned. Humanity had walked away silently once, leaving the Luminari to face the consequences of their arrogance. But this time, they had returned, not out of obligation, but out of compassion and understanding. In doing so, they had forged a new path, one built on mutual respect and shared purpose. The galaxy was vast and unpredictable, but humanity had proven itself capable of rising to the challenge. And perhaps, just perhaps, the Luminari had taken their first step toward becoming allies instead of adversaries.